It's Sunday, March 15, 2026, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time here in Champaign, Illinois. A very windy afternoon. You're joining me for session 6 of the Deadbolt Mystery Society play-by-mail game called Letters from a Ghost Hunter. Session 6 of 12. So we're just about at the halfway point. Let me check in with the chat, see how everyone is doing, what everyone's up to. You guys know that my preferred time to be awake and on YouTube is through overnight in the dark hours of the evening. That presents a challenge occasionally for these 1 p.m. afternoon streams that I do think are healthy. It's nice to have a different group join me for these afternoon weekend streams, but it does frequently mean that I'm not 100% rested for these weekend afternoon sessions. Now, normally it means I have to set my alarm clock and wake up earlier than I would normally wake up. In an ideal world, I'm up at 4 p.m. or so, and then awake through into the morning of the next day. But my sleep schedule has gotten a little messed up, so now I've been up 14 hours. It feels weird. It doesn't feel like this is the right time of day. So we're just going to, one of these days I am going to fall asleep on stream. I've been close a couple times where the eyes start to defocus. Anyway, so today we're going to start by having a little correction to a puzzle that was solved in the previous week's letter. And I'm going to tell you the story of that fix, the correction. So let's start there. In last week's letter, we learned a couple of things of import to our story. The main thing we learned is that, remember, we've hired this ghost hunter to go into the sanatorium. We're hunting a serial killer whose trail has gone cold, although there is someone in this abandoned sanatorium with our ghost hunter. We're afraid that the serial killer is still alive. We know that the serial killer, we're learning some facts about them, their demographics, but we're also learning they're motivated by some pharmaceutical drug. They're maybe working for someone else. They're obsessed with time. This is a supernatural case. I'm getting a little feeling that there may be some time. I don't know what's happening here, but a main thing we learned last week was that our daughter Nancy, who's gone missing, was hunting this serial killer back in the day when she went missing. So we think the serial killer got her, as well as her friends. We know the serial killer killed her friends. But what we learned last week is that Nancy, the reason she's hunting this serial killer in this sanatorium is that her mother, which is our wife, was the second victim of this serial killer, killed, and was a patient in the sanatorium, and was keeping a list of possible suspects. It's a little bit vague about suspects. What Nancy says in her note, let's just read it because it is kind of interesting. She says, my mother's name was Evelyn Cross Montgomery. Cross was her maiden name. You may recognize that name as victim number 2 on the list of people who were murdered by TikTok. Mother was paranoid, schizophrenic, suffered from delusions, was committed by Nancy and us, the person who's now in present time commissioning this investigation. We didn't tell our investigator. He complains about it later. He says, "What haven't you told me about this?" Anyway, he says, you might wonder why I keep sending you these photographs of people when they don't seem like there's a reason to suspect them. And Nancy says, well, the reason is simple. My mother kept a list. Whether the list was real or the result of her delusions, I don't know. Every name that I present to you was on her list. The list was entitled, "One of these people wants me dead." So this is a little bit of a complication for us because now we're told that the mother had delusions and she's the one giving us these lists of people over time. So she could just be completely deluded. But also this statement of one of these people want to kill me, that may not be the serial killer she's talking about. So I think we better be wary of assuming that the serial killer is necessarily going to be one of the people on our suspect list. Now, here is the puzzle that we sort of got wrong. All right, it's a little classical constraint satisfaction puzzle, and I tried to solve it on the fly. We're told that it was a weird setup. We're told that this password is going to be used in the future. So we're decoding this password from this chef that we're going to need at some point when we come across a locked file called Blackledger. This is the password to unlock it, and we don't need it. We didn't need it in session 5, but we'll need it in the future. It was a little constraint satisfaction problem where we were trying to find the last meal for each of these people. They all have some constraints about, here are the people, here are the final meals. We have to figure out which meal went with which person. Each meal starts with a letter. So when we get them in the right order, we'll have a password. And here are the constraint stuff. So we went through it and we got this password, SATRTJKT. When we finished the session, on the Discord, Stacy, one of the Discord members and viewers who's played huge numbers of these games and has sent me some games as well, said, I think you made a mistake. You assigned to one of these people who doesn't eat fish a fish meal. I checked it and she was right. She made a mistake of her own, and we both agreed that it's a little difficult because normally with a puzzle, there's a word that gets spelled out when you get it right, and that's like a little bit of confirmation. And so what I did was I made a proper grid. This is how you should be solving these kinds of things properly. So you write down a grid. Here are the people, and here are the meals. So then when you find out someone has a specific meal, you know no one else can have that meal, and they didn't have any of the other meals. So as you fill in, you can start crossing out the rest of the grid. And that's what I've done here. When I could figure out, like Samuel Price wanted to meals that have no doubles, well, there was only one of those. So that's definitely what he's eating. He's definitely eating the lemon herb roasted chicken. So then you know that he's not eating any of these in the row, and that everything in this column, no one else could be eating the lemon chicken because he's eating it. Something interesting happened when I did that. I found my mistake, of course, and then I shared it with Stacy, and we were both saying it's weird because it feels like there's, at the end, there were two possible ways to divide up the final two meals. There were two people left. They both could eat either of the meals, basically. So I was thinking, have I done something wrong? Like, you can't have a constraint satisfaction puzzle where there's two possible ways to solve it. And theoretically, if it's a password, we could try both of those ways, but it doesn't feel right. I thought, did the designers make a mistake? But something interesting happened when I wrote down the two possible solutions. Here were the words, very close to what we thought, how we thought it was, but a little bit different. And then there's two possible solutions for these two people, T and R. But look at this word now. Do you notice anything? I mean, now you can see it here. But it became clear that, in fact, there is a phrase here. It's not spelled properly, but it's clearly meant to be straitjacket. And that's how we can resolve between these two ambiguous solutions. It's going to be TR so that the final phrase, that's the password, is an abbreviation for straitjacket. So with high confidence, we now know the proper password for the Blackledger file is this phrase here. All right, so that catches us up. I thought it was a pretty cool thing that it turned out that there was a phrase that when you got it, it made sense. So that was pretty well done. All right, so let us now open up letter 6. Well, I guess you guys probably cannot hear the howling wind, but it is kind of out of control out there. Okay. Week number 6. Here's our Ghost Rid guy, ghost hunter, who's writing us, Elijah Nicholas. Week number 6. Well, we're at the halfway point of this endeavor, and I don't think we have nearly all the answers we had hoped to discover, but we're getting there, and that has to count for something, doesn't it? We have a lot of the pieces to this puzzle, but we just don't know how they fit together. It reminds me of the case of the haunted Hammersmith Hotel. I was there for a month and barely got any sleep because of the continual poltergeist activity. Because of all the paranormal evidence I gathered, I had all the information I needed. It was just difficult to concentrate long enough to put it all together. Once I took a step back and evaluated everything carefully with the help of a pair of good noise-canceling headphones, I was able to connect it all in a way that made sense. Why am I telling you this? Maybe I'm saying it as much for myself as for you. Hope springs eternal, and I'm hopeful that we're getting closer to finding out the truth about Nancy and Evelyn. To that end, I'm taking a step back and looking at the information we have that we haven't used yet. Those are the avenues we're pursuing. Well, that and exploring the auditorium. One thing that bothered me about this entire situation is why on earth would Vailwood close its doors for good and leave everything behind? But even more to the point, with so much evidence pointing to a lot of shady business, including serial murder and potential off-the-books experiments, you would think that the guilty parties would have made sure everything was scrubbed, removed, taken off site, and hidden or destroyed. Based on the amount of equipment, computers, files, etc. left behind, that obviously wasn't the case. Now, you and I spoke about this in some detail, and you didn't know the answer either. There were a lot of competing stories about what really happened, but I think I found out the real reason. Janet Watkins' note in her locker hinted at it. Some additional records spelled it out more clearly. She called the state health department and reported the asbestos that she had planted inside Vailwood. Apparently, she did a good enough job that the state shut the place down immediately and forced the closure, removing that decision and timeline from the hands of the owner and board of directors. Since the state was only worried about asbestos and nothing else, they completed their investigation within a few weeks. Given that nothing else raised a red flag for them, I'm guessing the Vailwood admin thought they were in the clear and decided not to bother with any additional efforts to erase their deeds from existence. Seems sloppy to me, or at least arrogant. As I mentioned, I want to take a step back and look at the things we've learned but haven't really done much with. In my mind, those things are the name and identity of the owner of the spell book I found in the exam room. That was I believe, the owner of the manager of this whole place. The locked file that Peter Poe mentioned, that's the Black Ledger one that the straitjacket password was for. Morris Cook, who is he? We were told by someone that TikTok works for Morris Cook, or does it for him. Patient 164, this is a person in room 164 who left us a note saying they're trying to drug us with this NeuroQuell to make us delusional, and there's a conspiracy going on. All right, reminder that the back of this doesn't explicitly say it's hints, but it feels like it's hints for this week's letter, so we try not to read that yet. But it starts with a recap of last week. All right, thoughts and observations for last week's mailing. The 4x6 image, this was the second one I found. I don't really have enough of these to make a complete image yet. I found it alongside Nancy's note from last week. Trigger item session. Even in death, these three still work together. The locks and unlocks match up perfectly with the string of letters. Once I took the letters that correspond to the locks and the letters that correspond to the unlocks, I had something that made a lot of sense, but was also a bit unsettling. That was the note we decoded. I forget what it said, but we wrote it down. Nancy's note and Ouija board. Nancy gave me the starting point for their seance, the letter in the window at the planchette on the back of her note. From there, all I had to do was follow the directions where it led me, gave me Janet Watkins' locker combination, which we figured out. We got in. Then we got the last meals. Last meals, basically, I needed to match each last meal within each victim. Then once I had that done, I could take the letter of each dish in the order of the victims and get a password for a mysterious file I haven't found yet. Interestingly enough, the password I obtained is more like a license plate word, meaning it isn't spelled correctly, but you know what word it's supposed to be. All right. So that's the setup. I like this. I like their system of each week, them basically giving you hints if you failed to solve something from the previous week. This week's mailing, we've got a little bit of a sticker. Almost looks like a glow-in-the-dark thing. We've got a Polaroid of a new suspect, Jenny Harper, the activities director. 43 years old, 5'8", 170 pounds, blonde hair, green eyes. Another postcard puzzle. And then 2 sheets here. All right, let's start with this one. Is this going to be a letter from Nancy? Note 6, you got into the locker. I knew you could do it. Well, I guess that's not really true, since I don't even know who you are or why you've stumbled onto my trail of breadcrumbs. For all I know, maybe you're the one who killed my mother and you're erasing any trace of your misdeeds, or maybe you're someone my father sent to look for me in the event I don't show up again, which is the case. At this point, it doesn't matter, I guess. Onward. Here are some things I've learned since our last conversation. I've found some info about each of the suspects I've uncovered so far. Each of the suspects I've uncovered so far that tells me exactly why they should be considered as suspects. Since all of these people seemingly had skeletons in their closets. I'm not saying any of these people were all bad. People rarely are. Usually they're a mix of good and evil, saint and sinner. So take this for what it's worth. Why is this page so dirty? Does it mean anything? Is there any black light stuff here? Why, it's kind of weird. Why is it so dirty? Okay, so here's the list of people. Kevin Leclerc was reprimanded for being overly aggressive with a patient who wouldn't cooperate. The hospital covered it up despite the patient sustaining 3 broken ribs in the altercation. Carter Ennis reportedly was selling meds out of the pharmacy and splitting the profits with Franklin Betts, who was all too eager to synthesize more of what Ennis needed in order to turn a profit. Franklin Betts, see above. Garrett Arndt was reportedly under investigation for medical malpractice, supposedly left a clamp inside a patient during surgery because he was intoxicated in the OR. It was a widely known fact he was rarely sober when performing his surgeries. Peter Poe is known to dope certain patients' food that he didn't like or who had crossed him at some point. And Jenny Harper, who's in today's letter. Jenny Harper, interestingly enough, Jenny Harper worked for Black Spire Pharmaceuticals when it was a startup. Huh. Now, about what I said last week about the other members of my group being up to something. After I caught Richard going through my stuff, I also happened upon those same 3 members of the group huddled up, talking in hushed tones on another occasion when they saw me coming. They all started acting weird and stopped talking. It was obvious they were talking about me. At this point, I feel like a bit of an outsider, and I don't exactly feel safe. These people are my friends, or at least I think they are. But I think they're on a different side of this than I'm on. Yes, I kept something from them. They don't know my mother died inside Valewood walls, so they might very well think the same thing about me that I think about them. At this point, Jansen seems to be the only one I can trust. Oh, and I found out something else about this Neuroquel drug that my mother and lots of other patients were given. Neuroquel, according to the Black Spire documentation, is meant to restore brain function in patients who have been in a coma for extended amounts of time. What doesn't make sense is that none of the people who were given the drug were in a coma. If anyone would know the real cause of death for all the patients who died that were Neuroquel trial subjects and weren't murdered like my mom, it would be Angus Cartwright. As Valewood's mortician, he would likely be privy to every actual cause of death. I don't think the reasons listed on the death certificates were legit. I think this was Valewood and Black Spire's way of covering their tracks, but surely Cartwright would know. Maybe I should summon his spirit and ask. Oh, and for what it's worth, patient 164 died today. I saw them rolling the gurney out of his room. I still don't know who he was. Maybe he was silenced. Maybe he died of natural causes. Or maybe he was another victim of the off-the-books Neuroquel trials. I guess technically he can tell us everything since he is no longer bound to this mortal coil. Technically, he can tell us everything. Doctor's office is my next stop. Look under the examining table for my next note. Okay. And there is Jenny, another suspect, activities director. A sticker, which is probably just a sticker for fun. It's the logo of Ghost Rid that Elijah Nicholas works for. All right, so that's that. This sheet is our last piece of physical evidence in this letter. But it looks like we've got 1, 2, at least 3 puzzles. Let's see what we've got. Unanswered questions that I need to examine this week. Jeremiah McClinton's computer. It's interesting to me that the man in charge of running Valewood would use such an outdated computer for anything. However, it is worth noting that this computer does not possess the ability to connect to the internet. Perhaps that was the entire point of using equipment so outdated. Maybe this computer had nothing to do with Valewood operations. He may have had a MacBook for that, which he keeps with him. It might be that this computer is only used for secret things. And what is on this little post-it note here? Password is my Black Spire nickname. So this is Jeremiah McClinton's computer. Password is his Black Spire nickname. We may have to go through our notes to see if we were told that. I don't remember. Okay, room 317, Morris Cook's room. This is the Morris Cook we've been waiting to find out about. In Nancy's fourth note, she mentioned a man named Morris Cook who was on life support in this room. The room number and the time, each if TikTok's victims were murdered, are the same. 317, 317. That can't be a coincidence. Given the fact that this patient was being kept alive through artificial means and more than 5 years have passed. I'm going to assume that Morris Cook is now deceased. Based on that assumption, I have tried to contact the spirit of Morris Cook to see what I could learn. The only message I have been able to obtain is an audio clip and a string of letters obtained through automatic writing. The logo is 2 letters. Maybe that tells me how to do the conversion. So are we saying V turns to W? Just a +1 or a -1? T-I-C-K. Yeah. Okay. So VW is just a shift of 1. So what we've got here is just a simple Caesar cipher shift of 1. THBJ is going to pick. So what have we got? T-I-C-K. T-O-C-K. Whoa. You can't see it. Oh, look how it decoded. TikTok is my child. So we were told in some message, go find Morris Cook. TikTok does this for him. So is TikTok killing people to somehow, because of some schizophrenic thing, to help his father who's in a coma, who needs NeuroQuell? The NeuroQuell could potentially heal, bring Morris Cook out of a coma and life support. So is TikTok somehow doing the trials, killing people to help his father? Okay, that's creepy. Now, why is there a QR code? Seems like we already know that answer, but maybe that's to listen to the audio? I don't know. All right. Here's patient 164. At this point, I don't know if patient 164 is still alive or not, but based on the fact that the patient hid a journal note in his room at one point, I'm hoping he did that in some other location in the room as well. I'm going to tear that room apart and see if there's something else of note that will give me more information about who he was and what happened to him. The ghost named Judge mentioned the number 1304 as being significant. Perhaps I can use that somehow, or at least determine why the number mattered to patient 164. Update. I found a weird story written underneath a loose tile in the room. I don't know how to even start figuring out what it means, if anything. See the other side to read it. Okay, patient 164, the one who was sort of in here undercover, who was being drugged up, has left a weird story underneath a loose tile. And that story is on the other side of this. Okay, and then we're told the special number 1304. All right, let's see. Creaking tiles echoed as I entered the abandoned ward. Ash drifted from the ceiling like gray snow. Lights flickered once, then chose darkness. Locked doors rattled as if something inside wanted out. Papers whispered across the floor with no wind to push them. Distant footsteps counted time I didn't have. A cold intercom crackled, awake by itself. Static shaped my name and held it too long. Knuckles rapped from inside the walls. Faded charts bled ink onto my hands. Operating lamps swung like slow pendulums. Rust stained the drains beneath the tables. Just a name appeared, scratched into the glass. After I read it aloud, the room answered. Nurses' shoes crossed the hall with no bodies above them. Ice crept up my spine when the door sealed shut. Every clock stopped at the same second. Green emergency lights hummed like insects. I heard breathing that wasn't mine. Voices begged softly from the locked cabinets. Echoes spilled warnings I couldn't forget. Her silhouette waited at the far end of the corridor. Eyes empty, she pointed at my phone. Reception bars appeared, then vanished. My screen lit with a number I didn't recognize. Yellow tape fluttered, urging me closer. Nothing moved when I tried the exit. Under the floor, something laughed. Messages typed themselves, one digit at a time. Blood-red letters confirmed the call connected. Every line went silent as she answered. Ringing stopped, and the building finally listened. The payphone in lobby still works on occasion if you wiggle the cord until you hear a dial tone. It's very finicky. Call her and tell her the number. Nothing cryptic about that note, right? Too weird. One thing about the note, however, was correct. I played around with the cord and finally managed to get a dial tone, so this phone does still work and can make outgoing calls, which is helpful to know. The cord obviously has a short in it, which means it isn't reliable, but beggars can't be choosers. So who should I call and what should I give them? So this sounds like it's hiding code message, but what do we think it's hiding? Who should I call? So maybe a number. And what should I give them? And then we've got this other clue about the number 1304, and he's in room 164. All right, well, you could try the normal stuff, right? We might look for an agnostic. Look at the first letters here. CALLPDASKFORJANIEGIVE. Obviously, this is spelling a sentence here. Okay, CALL, call, PDASK, FORJANIE, ask for Janie, GIVE, give, HER, MY, NUMBER. Call PD, ask for Janie, give her my number. Okay, straightforward. And then we think his number is probably 1304. That's going to be because he was an undercover officer, detective, an undercover operative who checked himself into this sanatorium to investigate it. And this is going to be his, like, ID. All right, so we don't know what this is about. We're going to need to know his nickname here. We think we know this. I guess we can start with the one we know and do this one, yeah? All right, let's see. I like this idea that we're calling this payphone. Who should I call? No caps, no spaces. Okay, so call the PD. No. What's it? It is PD, right? Call PD. Ask for Janie. Does that mean it wants us to type Janie? No, maybe it just wants us to type police. What does it want from us? I mean, call PD. Well, is PD an abbreviation for someone that we know? What does the chat think about this? Who should I call? Maybe it wants police department. This is one of these silly things where we're having to try a million possibilities. Surely this game shouldn't be so sensitive about this. What are we missing? Add the number? No. Oh, and what should I give them? I see. Okay, you're right. It does say, and what should I give them? Okay, so PD1304. Here's another thing that goes wrong with these things. Like, it says no, try again. So every time I resubmit, nothing even shows on the screen. Give her my number. So, do we want to call Janie with 1304? It's just there's something off about the creation of this game. It's like they needed to spend another week on it, another month. Just there's no reason for me to have to try all these different versions. Call PD, ask for Janie, and then the question is, who should I call? And if you type in PD 1304, you've obviously decoded the message, but it just says no, try again. That's just silly. All right. Valley Falls Police Department. Valley Falls Police Department. How may I direct your call? I need to speak to an officer named Janie. We have a dispatcher named Janie. That's the one. Hold, please. 2 minutes on hold. This is Janie. How can I assist? My name is Elijah Nicholas. I'm currently doing some work over here at Valewood Sanatorium. I'm looking into an old missing persons case from about 5 years ago. During my investigations, I have run across some information about a specific patient that mentioned your name at one point. I'm not interested in talking about that. Whatever you're looking into, you should probably stop. That line of investigation is dangerous. I understand. I just have one question. There was a patient here in room 164. I have reason to believe you might have known him. Does the number 1304 mean anything to you? How did you find out about that? What does the number mean? I'm not willing to say a lot because I know what these people are capable of, but I will tell you this. The number you just mentioned was the badge number for Detective Greg Hernandez. He was committed to Valewood after the chief of police required him to have a psych evaluation because of what they deemed erratic behavior. Greg was perfectly sane, even though the evaluation showed anything but that. Hernandez got too close to something, and they put him in Valewood to discredit him. You said that, not me. I've seen evidence here that this isn't the first time they did that. Hernandez and I were engaged before he was committed. They killed him in that place to keep him quiet. My heart is still broken. I'm so sorry. Did you know what he was investigating? Look for a file called Blackledger. Greg said it would explain why. Click. Phone disconnects at this point, and repeated attempts to get it to work aren't successful. Okay. So another mention of Blackledger, but let's also write down this patient 164's real name. Was Greg Hernandez. And he was getting too close to something, so they had him silenced, drugged up and silenced. All right. What's next for us then? We have decoded this message. TikTok is my child, the child of Morris Cook, who was on life support in a coma, but we don't know why there's a QR code here. So let's try that. See what it wants from us. Oh, I see. We're going to get to listen to the audio. This is the audio that our guy got when he tried to contact the assumed dead spirit of Morris Cook. He assumes Morris Cook is dead. I am not ready to assume that.
The logo is the key.
Okay, you can hear it, but I can't.
The logo is the key.
That's unfortunate. Why would that be?
The logo is the key. The logo is the key.
Okay. I can't hear it. This used to work perfectly. Lately, it seems it's touch and go. Maybe the chat can let me know if it's clear what he's saying. Otherwise, I'll have to try harder to get it to work.
The logo is the key.
It's really quite annoying. All right, so either the chat is going to tell me what that audio is, or we're going to have to take some time to get it to work. You can't hear it? Surely you can hear it. Sorry, now surely you can hear it.
The logo is the key. The logo is the key.
Is it too quiet? Is that what it is?
The logo is the key.
I mean, I can see that the audio is coming through, but I also see that it's quite quiet.
The logo is the key. The logo is the key.
The logo is the key. Okay, so essentially it's just repeating what was already very obvious and explicitly said here. It's like the producers of the multimedia on this case frequently are not talking to the people who are creating the written material for this case. This is the second or third time that we've been told something and then given some multimedia that is basically identical. And in this case was super easy in a shift to one. I feels like they're not quite operating on all cylinders here, but all right. So we've got super easy, and then we've got this one that's completely obscure. It's obscure because I guess it's going to require us to find the letters mentioning McClinton and remind us that we probably were told his nickname. So not so much a puzzle, but a matter of going through the old document. Okay, let's see if we've taken any notes on McClinton. Jeremiah McClinton's computer. Which one was Jeremiah McClinton? He was the owner of Valewood, and we learned about him in letter 2. Okay, so that's where we'll start. I suppose we could also scan that QR code. I assume it's just going to ask us to guess the password. But before we go hunting for McClinton, let's just go ahead and do this. What is the password? Yeah, okay. So let's go find letter 2 and see if we can remind ourselves if his nickname was mentioned somewhere, or maybe we might also find it in his photo. Betts was the chemist. Jeremiah McClinton was not one of our suspects. We do have another postcard. Still doesn't seem like it's going to be enough. Let's put that with that. All right. Maybe the channel has a theory about his password, but I don't have one. Let's see if it jumps out at us from letter number 2. And then I'll check with the chat if someone has a theory. Trying to talk to the mortician. There might be someone else on the premises. Okay, so Jeremiah the Eye, from the library of Jeremiah the Eye. That was the spell book. Could this be his nickname? P17 turned out to be a room where patient Morris Cook is being kept on life support. Book on the occult. The killer knew all the victims. This was a decoded message. The killer knew all the victims. this was a way to decode a different message. We've also got the brochure that might mention Jeremiah. So this was Jeremiah the eye. And then I thought that meant a hint about the eye, but it was irrelevant. I'm just going to try a couple things here. The eye. That was it. Well, we got lucky. Okay. Jeremiah McClinton's computer. We could have spent hours on that. Luckily, I decoded it and kept this note because it was so. We got stuck on this for a long time because I thought Jeremiah, when we decoded this, it said the eye. I thought for sure that was a way of hinting us to look at the eyes here. But when it wasn't, I did a lot of complaining about this puzzle, but it's come back to save me because I was so focused on the idea that this said Jeremiah the eye that I kept this note. And that turns out to be the nickname. I don't think I like that puzzle. I think groups might be really stuck on there. There's no hint that that was his nickname or anything. I don't know about this group running this game. Jeremiah McClinton's computer comes to life when I put in the password the eye. It only takes me a few minutes to find a set of files that are mostly encrypted and password protected. I remember Peter Poe's statement about finding a file called Blackledger. Try as I might, I don't find that file on Jeremiah's computer. What I do find, however, is an entry that seemingly refers to a patient death, and a nurse I can only assume is Janet Watkins. Janet Watkins was the last victim of TikTok. I believe that's right. I believe she was the last victim. We have a newspaper report on her. So here's what it says. Yeah, eighth and final victim. Neuraquel. Is something happening to the screen or are my eyes blipping out? Neuraquel trial number 8. Patient demonstrated stroke-like symptoms. Nurse knows the cause and is documenting everything. She is threatening to file a report with the Board of Health. This may be a problem. Calling our mutual friend to silence her. As long as we keep Morris alive, the killer will continue to do whatever we ask. Especially since the one we called forth lives inside TikTok. Think of that as our way of putting a leash on our attack dog. Angus will do his part too and take care of the patient's remains. That's the mortician. Cremation will eliminate any trace of Neuraquel. The advice to choose only test suspects with no family who will need to be buried in Valewood Cemetery was a good one. The path to the Black Spire is long and winding. Each success brings us closer to riches on earth. Each death is another step towards Black Spire. Where the Exalted One waits at the top, nothing we do here is in vain. Hey, there are a lot of things about this I don't like, but given that I learned about Jeremiah's nickname in a spell book, I'm equally cautious about the last part of the entry. What is all this talk about the Exalted One and the path to Black Spire? If I'm interpreting this correctly, it seems like Jeremiah summoned something that possessed TikTok. That would explain all the murders. Is it possible our killer is the victim of demonic possession? And the chat says, I guess some patients died by Neuroquel and some by TikTok to cover up the scam. Yes, I think that is a good summary of what's happening here. We've got a conspiracy group at this hospital giving people this experimental weird drug Neuroquel. And they have a way, when patients die, they have to get rid of them. But when they have to kill someone who's catching on to their scheme, they have some control over the serial killer and they have the serial killer go kill them. But let's read this part again. He says, okay, we're going to call our mutual friend to silence her. And we know that the mutual friend, TikTok, is the child of Morris Cook. So they're saying as long as we keep Morris Cook alive and maybe threaten to take him off life support, then we can control and motivate TikTok and he'll do what we want. The killer will continue to do whatever we like. Okay, that's all fine. No sign of supernatural in that first paragraph. But then the last sentence of that says, especially since the one we called forth lives inside TikTok. Think of that as our way of putting a leash on our attack dog. So that is the weird part. And is the one they called forth that's inside TikTok, is that the leash on the attack dog? That's pretty weird, huh? And then they start talking about some Lovecraftian Black Spire, Pillar, all that stuff. Wow. I mean, it seems like it would be nice to have a note of that in printed form, but I guess we'll have to make do with a screenshot. All right, there's some group here, they want earthly riches, but they also seem to be dealing with some supernatural demonic possession, perhaps. And they are using this killer, who might have been, was this killer a serial killer even before they summoned this thing inside it? Like if you summon forth a demon to be in the body of this TikTok, and that demon like had full control of it, you couldn't threaten the demon by saying, we'll take your father off life support, because the demon would be like, what the fuck do I care? It's not my father. I'm not this person. I'm just in his body. So they seem to be describing a situation where this killer is a killer on his own, and we're leveraging him because we've got his father under our thumb, but that in addition, there is some demonic spirit cohabitating his body. In an earlier letter, they were talking about a dark one that was there for eons. It's true. We were hearing about someone being there for eons. So we've got some sort of cohabitation of some eternal spirit. Well, I mean, that part of this I like. Anything that's like not just ghost hunting, but some world-ending Lovecraftian spirit that lives forever is pretty compelling story. All right. Well, I guess we're done for today. Oh, that's right. The chat is reminding me of a couple more details. They gave the spirit's name as Malachar in letter 4. I think I'm going to have to write down some of this so I don't forget it. We did write down Malachar at some point. This is letter 6. All right. Well, I guess we are done for this week. Only at the halfway point. That's the part I like about this. I am not convinced they're fully spending as much time developing this as they should have compared to normal Deadbolt Mystery Society consistency. But I do love the long story form here. The idea that we're only at the halfway point and now we've got signs of some sort of ageless demon possession inside a serial killer and a conspiracy. That's pretty cool. All right, I'll see you all next time.